$350,000. That is roughly what the average American homeowner has gained in equity over the past decade. Sounds like the best investment you have ever made. But you did not just pay a purchase price. You paid property taxes every single year. You paid homeowners insurance that climbed every renewal. You paid for a new roof, a furnace, a water heater, and the kitchen remodel your wife wanted in year 6. And when you add every one of those costs back in, the number that remains is not $350,000. It is nowhere close. You are in the right place if you own a home. You have built equity, and you have never once calculated what that equity actually cost you to create. Because most homeowners measure their return the wrong way. They compare what they paid to what it is worth now and call the difference profit. That is not how returns work for any other asset, and it should not be how you measure your house. There is a formula that reveals your real rate of return on your home, and without it, you are carrying a number in your head that could be off by tens of thousands of dollars. The mistake starts with a concept called the headline return. You bought a house for $400,000. It is now worth $550,000. That is a $150,000 gain, and over 10 years, it feels like a roughly 3.7% annual return. That is what you see. That is what Zillow confirms, and that is where most people stop. But here is what a headline return ignores: the exposed cost layer. This is the collection of mandatory, non-optional expenses you paid purely because you own that house, expenses you would not have paid as a renter or as an investor in a different asset. And most homeowners have never totaled them. You earn a good income. You have a mortgage. You have kids in a decent school district, which means you probably have a property tax bill somewhere between $6,000 and $12,000 a year, depending on your state. That alone, over 10 years, is $60,000 to $120,000. Your homeowner's insurance ran roughly $1,500 to $2,500 a year. And what about the stuff that breaks? Maintenance. And every study from the National Association of Home Builders confirms this, averages 1% to 2% of your home value per year. On a $400,000 house, that is $4,000 to $8,000 annually. And if you refinanced even once, you paid closing costs again. That is a decade of writing checks just to keep the asset you already bought. Like owning a boat that charges you rent to sit in your own marina. Stack those numbers. Property taxes over 10 years. Call it $80,000 on the conservative side. Insurance, $20,000. Maintenance, $50,000. Closing costs on your original purchase and one refinance, roughly $18,000. That is $168,000. You gained $150,000 in equity and spent $168,000 to hold it. Your headline return was 3.7%. Your real return after ownership costs is negative. You paid more to own the home than the home gave back in appreciation. And this does not even include mortgage interest. Now, your brain is already pushing back. And it is right too. You would have paid rent if you did not own. That is the most important counter-argument. And in a moment, I am going to give it full credit, run the rent math fairly, and then show you what happens when you compare both sides to one simple alternative that changes the entire picture. If equivalent rent was $2,000 a month, that is $240,000 over 10 years. Subtract that from your $168,000 in ownership costs. And yes, you come out ahead by about $72,000. Ownership did save you money compared to renting in that scenario, but that saving is not the same as an investment return. And that distinction matters more than almost any financial conversation you will have about your house. Here is why. When you call your house an investment, you compare it to the other things your money could have done. That same down payment, $80,000, invested in a broad index fund, averaging roughly 7% after inflation over the same decade, would have grown to approximately $157,000. Your home equity grew too, but only after you continuously fed it with mortgage payments, taxes, insurance, and repairs. The index fund just sat there. No furnace, no roof, no property tax bill. Now, there is one thing working in the homeowner's favor that deserves a fair hearing. Leverage. You put down $80,000, but you controlled a $400,000 asset. If the house appreciated 37%, your equity did not grow 37%. It nearly tripled on the cash you actually invested. That is real. And if you itemize, mortgage interest deductions shave your effective borrowing cost further. But here is what leverage does not fix. It amplifies the return on paper, while the exposed cost layer eats it in cash. Every dollar of property tax, every roof repair, every insurance premium came out of your actual bank account, not out of leverage gains. Leverage made the headline number look better. It did not make the checks smaller. This is the comparison no one runs. So, let me line up the two numbers clearly. $80,000 in a home-generated equity that, after all, real costs, net you roughly $72,000 in savings over renting. $80,000 in an index fund generated $77,000 in growth while you slept. The home required 10 years of active expense. The index fund required 10 years of doing nothing. Let me say that again. The exposed cost layer, property taxes, insurance, maintenance, closing costs, turned a 3.7% headline return into a real return that barely edges out renting. And the same capital deployed elsewhere outperformed it with zero maintenance. And that is where the real problem shows up. Because if the house itself is not generating the return you assumed, then the share of your wealth locked inside it starts to matter a lot. That brings us to the part most homeowners never examine: how your net worth is actually structured, and whether the balance makes sense. Your home is not worthless. Far from it. It provides stability. It locks in a housing payment. While rents rise, it gives your family a school district and a neighborhood and a place that is yours. Those are real, and they have real financial value. A home is a consumption asset that also stores some wealth. That is what it is. Calling it your best investment is like calling your car your best investment because it got you to work. It served you, but the return came from what it enabled, not from the asset itself. Most of us remember the day we signed closing documents and felt like we had made it. That feeling was real. But it was about security, not about rate of return, and almost everyone confuses the two. So what does this mean for how you hold your money right now? If more than 50% of your net worth is locked inside your home, a 2023 Federal Reserve survey of consumer finances found that the median homeowner aged 35 to 44 held 62% of net worth in their primary residence. Then you are concentrated in a single illiquid asset that historically returns 2 to 4% after inflation before costs. That is a portfolio structure, and it deserves the same scrutiny you would give any portfolio. You would never put 62% of your retirement account into a single bond paying 2%. But that is functionally what a house-heavy net worth looks like. The question worth asking tonight is not whether your house was a good purchase. It probably was. The question is whether the equity sitting inside it is working as hard as it could. And the only way to answer that is to run your own version of this math. Pull up what you paid. Add every cost you can find: property taxes, insurance, every repair. Subtract what rent would have been. Compare that net number to what your down payment would have done in a simple index fund over the same period. That is your real return. Your number will be different from mine because property taxes vary wildly, from under 1% in Hawaii to over 2% in New Jersey and Texas. same house, same price, completely different math. This is how the math works. Your numbers are yours to run. Here is what to do with this. First, tonight, open your bank and credit card statements and total your property tax, insurance, and major maintenance for the last 3 years. Multiply by however many years you have owned. That is your exposed cost layer. Second, calculate your real return using the formula. Appreciation minus total ownership costs compared against alternative investment growth on your down payment. Third, if more than 55% of your net worth sits in your home equity, that is a concentration problem, and it is worth a conversation about whether a portion of that equity should be redeployed. Your house gave you a life. That is real. But the math on whether it gave you a return, that is a different question. And now you have the formula to answer it. The one thing this math does not tell you is what happens to that trapped equity when you actually need it. How you access home equity and what it really costs is a different set of numbers entirely.